Hi, it's Juliet. Welcome to my studio. Hey, it's Juliet. Welcome to my studio. Today, for October 2021 Beads of Courage Challenge through the Arizona Society of Glass Bead Makers, I'm going to show you how to make these cute little jumbo jets. I'm an aerospace engineer, so I totally love this, and I will show you a couple other variations on the theme, which are so cute. Anyway, so the requirements for this is you need to make a bead that has a place for the pilot and passengers, and obviously that's the body of the aircraft. It needs a means of propulsion. So I've got, this is a 2-engine aircraft, this is a 4-engine aircraft, and here's another 2-engine aircraft. You know, you can make one like a DC-10 with or an L-1011 with an engine in the tail. You can make it look like, you know, any other kind of aircraft you want. And you need to add some other decorative details. So in the case of these airplanes, I've got horizontal and vertical stabilizers. I've got, you know, pilot cockpit windshield up at the front, and I've got little dots down the side for the windows for the passengers to see out. So basically you need 3 things: a place for the pilot and the passengers, a means of propulsion, and some other detail. If you really want to get fancy, you can make some things like this. Like, these are little supersonic jets. And again, they have, you know, wings. This one's got a little bump on it on the cockpit for the pilot. This has a canopy on it as well. They've got some engines on the underside. And this one, it almost looks like a bug. I don't know what it is, but it's a fun little flying thing. It's a 4-engine fun little flying thing. So there's those. And if you really want to go to town, you can make biplanes. So one may think, oh, a biplane is too fragile, but if you put clear in between the 2 layers of wings, it sort of disappears, and you just see the top and the bottom wing. So you could even go and make biplanes for the kids. And again, all of these, they need a place for the pilot or passengers, a means of propulsion. So these ones have got propellers in the front, and some other details. So, you know, here we've got fancy dots on it and tails and whatever you want. So, hey, aerospace, flight, love it. You should all study engineering. Later. Bye. So let me tell you a little bit about the tools you need to make the airplanes. The handiest tool is to have some sort of either a stump shaper or magic wand. It's handy to be able to use the flat part. You can marver on this. You can use it to help shape and angle things, and the pointy end is often good for, you know, poking details and things like that. Mini mashers are good for like thinning wings and stuff. You got to make sure you don't make them too thin. They got to stay kind of cartoony and stubby so they're strong. You know, my basic tweezers I use a lot, and dental, you know, a flat dental thing for shaping and putting things into place. I find that handy. For some of them that have rounded things like the jumbo jets, sometimes it's easier to kind of shape the bead in either something like this or like a press something with a smooth groove. You know, you could use a spoon or a marble mold or whatever you want to kind of help get the round. You don't have to use any of that. You can use gravity. That'll generally take a little bit longer, but you can still pretty much do all of this without any type of a round shaping tool. So for glass, for the jumbo jet, I'm going to go with a let's see, how about we make pick a color that's still showable. How about you use yellow? We'll use yellow for the jumbo jet body, and I will use some white, blue stringer, which I have here, and some black stringer for some of the details on it, you know, including the engines and what have you. So we'll just kind of go with those colors, but pretty much sky's the limit. Any colors you want to use will work. I mean, hey, I made a pink fighter jet, you know. If you're going to try making things like the biplanes or the other ones, you don't even have to worry about the rounded shaping at all. Those are all pretty much flat things. So between your flat mashers and the magic wand or a stump shaper, that's pretty much all you really need for those. All right, let's get started. Alright, I'm going to fire up my torch. If you're using a lighter like I am, make sure you store it in a safe place away from flying bits of glass that could make it explode. Mine's in the drawer underneath my workbench. Okay, Beads of Courage likes to use the fatter mandrels, but it's not a strict requirement. It's just a little easier for the kids to string them. I'm going to use one of the thinner ones for this because it's easier to shape it if I'm making it little. I tend to kind of pre-smooth my dried mandrels with my fingers before I put them in the flame. That gets the grit off of them. Okay, so for the body of the jumbo jet, we're going to use the yellow. And so when I make this, I'm going to have the nose on the left side and the tails on the right side, and that just gives me better access because there's a lot more details on the tail side than on the nose side. It's just logistically a little bit easier to get in on the right side because I'm right-handed. So we'll put all the details on the back end. So something to think about is the angle or the wing sweep. And so the faster the aircraft flies, the more its wings need to be swept back. So, you know, biplanes have pretty much straight wings. They're out 90 degrees from the body because they're like old technology and slower. And, you know, the faster jumbo jets have swept wings. The older ones, you know, like DC-3s, don't have as much wing sweep. So that's a feature to think about when you're designing your aircraft, and that will kind of help, you know, people just envision what kind of an aircraft it is. So I'm winding on glass for the body. And, you know, if you think about like a 747, especially the early ones with a double-decker up in the front, they kind of had a little bit of a thicker nose, and they were a little slender, a little bit later, or a little further aft in the aircraft. So I'm kind of going for the jumbo jet style with the fatter front end. So I am winding on more glass on the front end, and you can see I have this flared out a little bit at the back end because I'm going to be attaching my tails there, and I want to make sure I have a good amount of glass in there. Yeah, a little bit more in the middle. It's a little too thin. If you think about supersonic aircraft, they have what's called Coke bottling, and they need to get narrow in the middle and fatter at the end, and that's for the purposes of wave drag, to reduce wave drag once you go supersonic. So that's why they tend to look like that. So if you're, you know, if you're making something that goes in the middle and back out at the end, it'll naturally look like a little bit more supersonic type aircraft. Heat this up a little bit more, and I'm trying to just nudge my front end into a round shape a little bit faster using the tool here. And then I'm going to make more of a cylinder on the other part and maybe blend it in a little bit better. You can only do so much to get these smooth shapes with tools. There comes a point where you just need to kind of heat it and let the glass flow and allow the surface tension to kind of do its thing. Now frequently I will heat it and I will hold it vertically and just let it kind of pull forward, and that will help give you a nice puckered bead hole on the front end. And if you want to get that going, or using gravity to help with that. And then you can also do that on the back end, and it'll help give you a nice bead hole. So I'm just heating the back end. When it gets to the point where it can flow, I'm heating it back a little bit so I can take some glass. Then I can kind of hold it vertically and let gravity pull it down. That'll give me a nice, this kind of Coke bottle shape, or, you know, almost looks like a bowling ball, a bowling pin. Alright, so next step is I'm going to build up my wings. You can make the wings the same color or a different color if you wanted. But we need to make them stubby and strong because, again, these are for kids, and then they need to make sure we don't end up with any broken wings and sharp edges because then they can't use them. So what I'm going to do is heat up a gather of glass and put it in the middle on one side. And then I'm going to heat up a gather and put it on the opposite side. And I'm going to go back and forth and sort of build up my gather. And you'll notice I'm sweeping from the front to the back, and that sort of builds up, and you know, leaves that little drop at the back end, sort of builds up the wings naturally in that swept shape. If I was working on like my biplane, I would sweep front to back and then back to front to try to balance it so they are less swept looking, and you know, more straight, going straight out from the aircraft. So it kind of depends on what kind of airplane you're going for. I think this one needs a little bit more glass here. Now I'm deliberately not, you know, squishing these down and thinning them because I want them to stay strong and stubby. What I want to do is get them balanced. And if you're doing jumbo jet, it has distinct wings. So you can see I'm taking my tool and sort of poking in here to keep the aft end of the wing from fully connecting to the fuselage. You know, if you have like a fighter jet or something, they tend to have that back end of the planform filled in, and so the wings aren't as distinct. So that's what makes this look a little bit more like a jumbo jet. And that wing, the front end looks like it needs to be filled in a little bit more, so I'm going to add a little bit more glass. And that wing right there seems a little bit out of balance. Okay, there we go. Melt that in. Now and then heat the nose and the tail. Alright, so we're starting to get the shape coming out pretty good. If we wanted to make it an older aircraft, we could adjust the shape by sort of pushing that back end forward and do it on the other side so that they match. You can see how that's sort of changing the look of the aircraft just by changing the angle of the wings. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a vertical and horizontal tail. So you got to decide which side of the airplane is the top or the bottom. And depending on the type of aircraft you look at, some of the, you know, aircraft like Cessnas, they have a high wing where the wing comes out of the top. Jumbo jets, it kind of comes out of the middle to the lower part. So, you know, you can decide depending on what kind of aircraft you're going for. So to do the vertical tail, I'm going to just add a couple of dots on the top. I'm going to build it up, heat it, and then I'm holding it upside down so gravity is kind of pulling it down, and I may need to add one more swipe on it to build up my vertical tail. Give some heat, insurance heat in the plane. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my horizontal tail. So I have one on one side of aft and one on the other side aft. I'm going to just add a second dot to that and make sure these are melted in and they're not sticking out too far. Now the sweep angle of the tail is generally the same sweep angle of the wing, and that's governed by the Mach number. Okay, so there we go. We got our wings and our tails. If you want to thin it out, or if it's, say, they're crooked, you can kind of straighten them out by using your little pair of tweezers if you need to. And now I'm going to add the windshield in the front. So let's see, I'm going to use a blue. Take a blue stringer here. And I'm just going to basically do a swipe, just a crescent, over around the front from one side, down around to the other side. At this point, if it's not perfect, before you melt it in, you can use your dental tool and get it into the right place at the right curvature. I'm going to flatten that out a little bit. Things will start cracking off. Right, so I'm going to smooth that out and melt that in. And that will be my windshield. I'm going to put a couple of white dots on it. And then I think I'll put some blue dots down the side of the plane, just for the passenger windows. Let's put 3 on either side. And we can sneak a 4th in there. There we go. And then I'm going to put some white dots on top of the blue dots on the windshield. Let me find this thinner stringer here. Give it insurance heat. And I'm going to just use my little tool here and just cut this end off so I have a blunt end, not a big ball. All right, let me put a little bit of heat in my tails. I don't want to heat them up too much and totally melt them in. All right, I'm going to heat it from the top and get my windows melted in a little bit. And so let's put a couple of, put 4 dots across the nose of the windshield. I'll make it look like, you know, 4 sections of glass in there. And I want to melt those in. You can kind of press them down with your tool. If the dot wasn't in perfect place, you can kind of nudge it a little bit with your tool as you're melting it in. Put one more over here. All right. So next we need to add some engines, and for that I'm going to use a black stringer, and I'm going to heat up the lower side of my wing, and let's see if we can, I think the wings are small. We'll make it a 2-engine airplane. Actually, one wing is smaller than the other. Let me, if your wing gets a little bit too short, you overheated it or it heated up more than the other, you can always do a cold join. You got to heat it up and touch glass to it, and then kind of pull it out a little bit. Wiggle it and pull it out, and then you can kind of just tap it off, and that will stretch the wing. There, now the other one isn't quite as pointy, so we're going to do this. You want to get your wings shape set pretty good before you start putting the details of the engines on it. Alright, those are fairly well matched now. Okay, so to do the engines, you're just using that same swiping technique that you used for the wings and the tails. And I'm going to start halfway back the chord of the wing and go forward. And they always protrude a bit to the front, and I'm swiping forward. So from halfway back, I'm swiping forward. Halfway back and swiping forward. And those kind of got a little stuck on the side of the fuselage there, which is okay. We'll make it stronger. Now I'm going to do another swipe. So next time you're on an airplane, look out and you'll see just how far forward of the wings that they stick. That gives them clear air. And one more swipe so we have a strong enough piece of glass there that it will stay put. And if you kind of want to pay attention and put more details on it, let me flatten this out a little bit with my tool. A bit of heat in my tails on the top side. I got a stringer in my mouth, excuse my talking. Alright, I want to get those a little straight. Then you can take your white stringer and add some dots on the front, like for the inlets. Just adding them on the front of the engines for the inlets. There you go. And we'll melt those in. There we go. If you want to, you can put, like, you know, a dot on the horizontal, excuse me, the vertical tail, sort of like the insignia of a airline. So again, the rules: you need a place for the passengers and the pilots. Okay, obviously we got that. You need propulsion. We've got our engines hanging off the wings. And you need some other details. We got all sorts of details. We've got tails, we got emblems, we've got windows and windshield and all sorts of fun things. So give a little bit extra insurance heat. Make sure you have good heat in the tail as well. At this point, if you need to adjust any sweep angles, you can do that. You want to make sure the curvature and the bluntness of the wings sort of matches. If it was landing, you could put dots on the bottom for landing gear. Anyway, there we go. One jumbo jet ready to take off, and into the kiln it goes. Okay, so I'm going to just show you the tricky part of making the biplane. So I started just by making a simple cylinder, which is the fuselage. Now next we want to build up wings off of one side and then the other side. But with a biplane, the wings come off the bottom and then off the top. So what I'm doing is I'm putting, you know, across, touching it straight to the cylinder. This will be the bottom of the wings. And I'm going back and forth and adding dots on either side, to just basically to build up our wings. We're going to be putting clear on top of this, so we can allow this to be a little bit thinner. It's, you know, it's not going to be by itself. It's going to, this whole area is going to be filled in with glass, so it'll be pretty strong. So I'm just, you know, putting a dot on one side, melting it, flipping it over, putting it down on the other side. And I'm basically building out my wings. And then I'm going to take my little mini mashers and flatten that. on one side and the other side to flatten my wings. And then I find it useful to kind of heat across the base and flatten that whole base. Make sure they're good and joined. You need to touch it up with the masher a little bit. So we have the bottom part of our biplane wings. So now we're going to take clear, and this is just, you know, regular old Effetric clear 004. You can use whatever kind of clear you want. It doesn't have to be a fancy clear. And this is a thinner rod. It's not. It's more like 5 to 6 millimeters. It's not like the 7 millimeter size. So it's a little thinner. And what we want to do is get a gather, and then we're going to wedge it in that corner and then pull it out. We don't want to get air bubbles in that join there. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I got a little gather. I'm going to go in that corner and then pull it out and just layer on the clear. Then I'm going to go back to the first wing and layer on some more clear. And basically what we're doing is we're filling up that gap between the lower wing and the upper wing that we haven't put on yet with clear. Now that allows you to see between both wings, like there's an air gap in there, although it's good and strong because we have clear. So at this point you can kind of smooth that out with the dental tool. You probably want to hit it from the front end, because when you swipe it's not necessarily perfectly smooth. You don't want this to all kind of suck up and just become a small dot though, so you want to try to retain the shape. So you're going to heat it and flatten it incrementally, and you want to go back side to side so one wing isn't getting too hot. Okay, so now we're going to put the rest of the wing, the top wing from the biplane on. And that's basically a swipe from the center to the edge and from the center off to the other wing. So swipe down and out, and then swipe down and out the other wing, and you probably need to put, you know, like 2 layers on. All right, once you've got that built up, you can then heat all across and flatten it on, you know, your marvering tool. You can also use your mashers to help flatten it a bit. So there we go. The rest of it is similar to the Jumbo Jet in terms of adding tails. I usually put a ring of a contrasting color around the front that looks like the you know, the radiator cowl, the old style engines. You can put a propeller on there if you want, but put it on a flat surface. Don't have it poking out because it'll just break off. You can put on tails, you can put decorations, and again, as before, you need a place for the pilot or passenger. You need a means of propulsion, and then some other details, so you can have fun. Turn this one into a biplane.
Thank you so much for subscribing, and don't forget to check out the rest of the playlist on all of our Beads of Courage transportation series. There's everything from airplanes to cars to sailboats to hot air balloons, flying saucers. And I know you guys are going to have as much fun making these as we did creating the tutorials. Thanks for supporting Beads of Courage, and have fun!